I've previously discussed the series finales of several Star Trek series, but I haven't really focused on the pilot episodes so much, and I wanted to discuss what I think is arguably the best pilot episode of a Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine's Emissary. Now, I'm particularly focusing on the golden era of Star Trek here, and I think the Cage from the original series is wonderful. I think TNG's Encounter at Farpoint is a bit of a mixed bag and a little bit of a snooze fest in some places. I think Voyager's Caretaker is quite strong. Enterprise Broken Bow is solid, but there's something really special about Emissary in my opinion. But we'll get to that in a moment. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and hit that like button and share it if you can. It's very much appreciated. Okay, so Deep Space Nine first aired on January 3rd of 1993. The first season consisted of 20 episodes. The show was created by Rick Berman and Michael Piller, who both wrote the story for Emissary, with the script being written by Piller. The episode is directed by David Carson, and it has a very cinematic feel. In fact, from the beautiful musical score by Dennis McCarthy and Carson's direction, I think Emissary has a very Star Trek Generations type feel about it, given that McCarthy also did the score for Generations and Carson directed that film as well. And you can really see that in the pacing, camera work, and editing. DS9's first two seasons overlapped with the final two seasons of The Next Generation, and there were several noteworthy crossovers between the two series during that time. Well, for starters, it was a major coup having Patrick Stewart appear in Emissary. This, of course, was something of a tradition in Star Trek pilots at the time, having a guest appearance from a legacy Trek character. Cullen would graduate from being a semi-regular on TNG as Chief O'Brien to a full series regular on DS9. I always thought that in its first season, DS9 felt a bit more like a spin-off of The Next Generation, given how it really grew out of the events surrounding that series. It took about 2 seasons for DS9 to truly come into its own, and when it did, it really became a unique and I think superior series to The Next Generation. I do love Next Generation, but DS9 had far deeper characters, story arcs, and a complex mythology all of its own that was really engaging, especially because the show wasn't confined solely to the standalone episode format that TNG was. The series is set aboard an abandoned Cardassian space station near the Bajoran wormhole. The Federation now runs the station alongside Bajoran officers following the end of the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. The series had many well-developed series-long plotlines, the Bajoran-Cardassian conflict being one of them, the wormhole alien story, which Sisko is at the center of because he's the emissary to the Bajorans, the Maquis story arc being another, but its most significant story was the Dominion War narrative, which developed on a slow burn from the end of Season 2 through to Season 4 and then really heated up in Season 5 with a full-scale galactic conflict which lasted till the end of the series. DS9 is an example of a show that brilliantly incorporated standalone stories along with multi-episode and multi-season arcs as well. There was an intention to differentiate the series from TNG by basing the series on a space station and not a starship, though runabout shuttlecraft were used for some time before the Defiant was introduced to allow the characters to travel away from the station sometimes. The wormhole allows for transportation to the largely unexplored Gamma Quadrant, which allowed for new alien species to come to the station and thus offered plenty of fodder for interesting stories. Another significant differentiator between DS9 and TNG is that there's quite a broad spectrum of different types of characters on the show, with much more conflict as a result. With so many aliens from different backgrounds, it allowed for more colourful interplay and drama at times. The station was a hive of activity, with all manner of people from across the galaxy coming and going, offering scope for lots of different plotlines. Emissary gives us a much deeper exploration of the main character than Encounter at Farpoint. We really didn't learn too much about Picard's background in Encounter at Farpoint, but we learn quite a bit more about Commander Sisko in Emissary. The episode opens with a clever use of a flashback to events that we never actually got to see from The Next Generation. The Battle of Wolf 359, where Locutus of Borg destroyed the Federation fleet, and Sisko was there aboard the USS Saratoga. This also marks the only time the Borg appear on the series. His wife Jennifer is killed during the attack, though he manages to rescue his son Jake and escape before the ship explodes. 3 years pass, and he has now taken a temporary assignment to command DS9 and pick up the pieces following the Cardassian departure and all of the various political and logistical issues that follow. Bajor is still recovering from decades of Cardassian oppression, and the station is a wreck. Picard has an important function in this episode beyond just a cameo. Picard gives Chief O'Brien a fitting farewell, and we also see that there's some tension between Sisko and Picard, because Sisko harbours a grudge against Picard given that it was he who, as Locutus, caused the massacre that killed his wife. Sisko meets with the Bajoran spiritual leader Kai Opaka, who informs him that he is the emissary and will discover the celestial temple of the prophets. Now, the prophets are alien beings who live in the nearby wormhole that Sisko and his Trill science officer Dax later discover. These aliens are considered gods by the Bajoran people. The episode also includes the introduction of series-long villain Gul Dukat, who I think is arguably one of the best and most well-developed characters in Star Trek lore. He is a deeply complex character, a megalomaniac narcissist dictator who ruled over the Bajoran people with brutal force, but he's wonderfully delusional about the whole thing because he thinks he was a liberator or father figure to them. He can't see himself for the monster he really was. He feels his hands were tied by the Cardassian government and that any atrocities committed under his administration were not his fault. Gul Dukat ultimately becomes a tragic character later in the show, in the 6th season, and I think that just goes to show what's great about this series, because the characters are so multi-layered. Every character in this episode gets a solid introduction and something decent to do. The DS9 promenade was designed to be kind of like a western town in space, complete with a seedy bar where Ferengi owner Quark would water down the drinks and engage in some shady business dealings. Chief of Security Odo is like the sheriff, referred to affectionately as Constable by Sisko. His office is also on the promenade, as is the infirmary, which is the sickbay run by the enthusiastic young Dr. Bashir. Now, Julian Bashir is a character who would undergo substantial change over the course of his story. We would later learn that he's actually genetically enhanced. The episode's second half spends much time with Sisko explaining the nature of linear time and our reality to the wormhole aliens. Despite trying to explain how time works, they remain confused because they can see that part of him remains in the past, with his dead wife on the Saratoga. It's the pain of this trauma that Sisko has to learn to overcome. He ultimately negotiates with them to allow ships to pass through the wormhole in both directions, and his appearance at the end of the episode emerging from the wormhole helps to end a Cardassian attack on the station. The episode contains so many important story elements and building blocks that will become an intrinsic part of the show's lore, from the Cardassian-Bajoran conflict, Gul Dukat, Sisko becoming the emissary. Even the seeds of the Dominion story arc are subtly laid, with Odo making a reference to his people being somewhere on the other side of the wormhole, a people he's desperate to find. Of all the Star Trek pilot episodes, I think Emissary is the most tonally consistent with the rest of the show that would follow in the subsequent 7 seasons. I think it's also aged very well and perhaps doesn't get the praise that it truly deserves. Let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.